SageNtheRage here.
We're here with a top 10 list. We haven't done these in a long while, but figured it's a good thing to jump into.
And we wanted to do this in conjunction with our game specs video on Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PlayStation. Or maybe.
Possibly, we'll see.
So in Top 10 today, we're going to be discussing the top 10 Final Fantasy playable protagonist characters. Now this is our top 10. It's completely our criteria. It's completely our opinions. So, get ready to flame up in the comments if you think we've made a bad pick. But again, it's our opinions. So this is our top 10 Final Fantasy playable protagonist characters.
And to clarify on the playable part, we're not talking that character you play as for like one tiny section of the game and then they're gone.
Yeah, like main through the game playable. So the criteria that we're going to be using in our top 10 today is, first criteria is character design. How does the character aesthetically look? Is it a character that is memorable just simply because it stands out amongst other characters in its design?
And our second criteria is character development. How do they grow? How do they fit in with the story? What is their character arc?
Third criteria will be player connection to the character itself. Are we actually connected while we play this game to this character? Do we care about what happens to this character? Are we involved and invested?
And lastly, character mechanics. How does this character play? What do they do? Does their, aesthetics and such play into their actual gameplay?
Yep. So, without any further beating around the bush, here we go with number 10. Rydia of Mist from Final Fantasy IV. Rydia is, first off, aesthetically just awesome design. She's green through and through. She stands out amongst the other characters inside of this entry in the franchise. Rydia also, as far as development goes, when you run across her as Kain and Cecil in the beginning of the game, she's a young child. You accidentally burn down her village, and you have to kind of save and protect Rydia through the first section of the game. As the game goes on, you come to find out later on that Rydia has grown up as she's been down in the Land of Summons, and time flows differently down there, and she comes in and saves you from Golbez when you're fighting him later on in the game. And it's such a turnaround to see a character go from helpless to super powerful. Now let's get into super powerful and mechanics. Rydia is outside of the job system of previous games. Final Fantasy IV really introduces the character that is the summoner. And Rydia and her summons give way towards other summoners in other games in the franchise and why they're so powerful. She controls Titan, Ramuh, Shiva, Ifrit, Bahamut himself. Very iconic summons, aeons, whatever you want to call them through the franchise, all root back to Rydia, in a sense, being this summoner who has a connection with them and controls them. Not just because she's been assigned a job from a drop-down menu, but because she has a real connection with these creatures. And so, mechanics goes, Rydia is just up there as a powerful summoner. Player connection, I always felt close to Rydia, because when you have to take care of somebody, it didn't feel like a quote-unquote escort quest. It's obviously 16-bit Nintendo, and you didn't have to escort quest to protect her. But as she grows up, she becomes one of the most powerful casters, and you feel really connected to her because you protected her at one time, and then she comes back and saves you. And you see that growth come through, so you feel like, man, I really am invested in Rydia.
Yeah, so Rydia as a character, you really get a full character arc with. You basically are with her from beginning to end of her whole arc, and she really just lays down the foundation for a lot of things we see later on in the Final Fantasy series.
Absolutely. Number 9.
Squall Leonhardt.
From Final Fantasy VIII.
This guy, he had to follow on the heels of another famous protagonist, but just character design, he's got the belts, the zipper, the leather. When you think Final Fantasy protagonist, Squall fits that to a T. And the Gunblade. That is one of the most iconic weapons you will find in any Final Fantasy game.
Well, I think it also affects mechanics. Like you mentioned, coming in behind Cloud Strife in the next, franchise entry, number 8, is a hard thing to fill. That's a hard shadow to walk in. And so mechanics-wise, the Gunblade pulled me in as a player because normally you just press fight and your character goes up and attacks. Where with Squall, he stood out in that you had to hit that trigger at just the right moment to get that extra damage. So every time you hit the fight button with Squall, you were a little more engaged with the game. Even so much as when he goes for his Renzakuken, that ultimate kind of limit break at the end, so to say, you're sitting there hitting that trigger just at the right time again and again and again throughout his attack. And just awesome gameplay mechanics that pulled you, the player, in to want to invest more into Squall. Now, I will give him some downsides. He's a little mopey.
He can be a bit one-note at times, Generally, his default is to kind of broody.
But he does develop as a character throughout the game. You see him go through, personal struggles. You see him go through physical struggles where he's almost killed, and he keeps growing and he keeps pushing. And his relationship with Rinoa keeps making him a better character. If he didn't have Rinoa with him, I feel like his development in the series would not go as far.
I agree 100% there. I just think Squall is very much a complete package character.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about him kind of works hand in hand to make him who he is.
And as far as player connection, this is just, again, my opinion and my perspective. I connected with Squall when I played Final Fantasy VIII when I was younger, simply because he had a bully, and that bully was Cypher. And, as a kid that was kind of bullied sometimes myself, I really connected with that. I want to rise up and gain strength and confront that which challenges me. And so that always pulled me into Squall, even though some of his other character attributes were less than, standoutish. But that part of it really pulled me in, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, he's really a character you can kind of project yourself on in a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which leads us to number 8. Faris Sherwiz from Final Fantasy V. This one's a bit of a curveball. Not a lot of people kind of bring up Faris as an outstanding character, but character design, I want to talk about Faris because the job system in Final Fantasy V, everybody puts on different costumes for different jobs, and aesthetically, I myself, in my opinion, found that Faris always looked the best in every job across the board, which also lends into Faris's character development. When you first meet Faris, she, quote unquote, is a captain of a pirate crew, and you need this ship. And so, in the beginning, your crew of Bartz and everybody else, Galoof and everyone else, and Reyna, thinks that Faris is a male, and she's very androgynous. And then you come to find out that Faris is a female. Later on in the character development, you come to find out that Faris is the separated sister of Reyna and is also of royal bloodline. So we see this character go through some really cool twists and some developments in learning who she is, accepting who she is, and accepting that she doesn't need to hide behind pretending to be a man to be a lean, mean pirate, and it's a woman who embraces that. And then also finding out that she's royalty and how does she interact with Reyna and deal with those things as well. So from the character design, she stands out. Development, she grows. Player connection, Final Fantasy V is a harder game to connect to the characters to. Bartz is so just, I'm a protagonist and I'm a good guy. But Faris kind of goes back and forth, and she's the one character in the game that stands out as kind of having an attitude, kind of having some ambiguity in what she's doing and why she's doing it. As far as game mechanics go, this one category on this character kind of falls out because everybody can do every job if you're assigned.
Yeah, but I want to actually touch on game mechanics here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works better for Faris more than most other characters because her arc is her already filling multiple roles as a character.
Mm-hmm.
She's a pirate, but she's also of royal bloodline. So you can kind of tie that in with the job system where, she already fills multiple jobs as a character.
Absolutely. Which leads us on to number 7 from Final Fantasy X, Yuna.
So, Yuna, in my opinion, is one of my favorite Final Fantasy X characters. If we're talking character design, she's got a very basic look to her, very simple, but it ties into who she is as a character. She's very kind of introverted, in her shell, shy, not outgoing. And this goes straight into her development where the whole story is really focused around Yuna and her accepting her role, accepting her destiny, and kind of breaking out to save her world.
Well, more importantly, when you get to the end of the storyline and she realizes that all of the faith and everything else and this big religion throughout the world is just a fallacy. And she says there will be no one to be selected as my faith. We're going to break this cycle. So not only is she simple and clean in her character design, but as her character goes development, we see somebody who is living their life for the people of Spira and going around learning the summons, full well knowing that what the end outcome is that she's going to die.
Yeah.
And then she gets to the end, realizes the truth, and defies everything that she has believed up to that point and becomes her own individual character. And as far as Final Fantasy X goes, I think Titus says it best, and this is why we picked Yuna over Titus, is he says, Yuna, this is our story. This is your story. And so Titus is just a shell for the player to move through everything with. Well, Yuna it's her story.
Yeah, it's very much focused on Yuna. If you remove Titus, you would still have most of Final Fantasy X.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove Yuna, you wouldn't have Final Fantasy X.
No, all the summons, everything else, how it all works. And as far as player connection goes, man, you get to see her try to carry the weight of the world. And you, as the player, don't realize that when you're first playing Final Fantasy X for the first time. You don't realize how much weight is on her shoulders. And yet she still tries to be human, tries to connect, tries to reassure everyone else like that. And when you realize later in the story all the weight that's on her shoulders, you really connect with her. And you say, I wish I could be her, in a sense. Like, she is so strong as a female character in that story with all these other strong males around her. She is even stronger in some senses. And then as far as mechanics goes, as we talked about Rydia of Mist being the reason that we have summons connected to people, you couldn't see a better summoner in any of the Final Fantasy games. She is truly connected with the creatures that she summons. When you summon Valfor and he comes in to fight with you, she stops first to hold his beak and pet his face, and she loves those creatures that she's connected with.
Yeah, the summoning mechanic isn't just a mechanic. It's not a materia you slap on your character.
Mm-mm.
Yuna is a summoner through and through. It's key to her story, and it's key to her gameplay. You know, those summons are what makes her powerful.
Mm-hmm. And then also giving her that strength so she can learn that she doesn't need them when she has to sacrifice them at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, Yuna, just wonderful character. Which leads us to another strong female at number 6. From Final Fantasy VI, Terra Branford. Terra is the definition of a powerhouse. You know, when you start this game out, you have this unidentified, mysterious woman in this Magitech armor, and you come to find out that she doesn't even need the Magitech armor to use magic. The Empire is trying to almost recreate the War of the Magi. The Emperor and Kefka are trying to use Terra to get a connection to the Espers, and eventually they succeed in that. But Terra has to go through this amazing development story arc where she has to learn that she is half Esper and half human. She's the product of two things coexisting in a world where they shouldn't, when they've been at war with each other. She has an internal struggle in herself to reflect that. Later on in the world of chaos, you see Terra try to fight, you know, do I want to be a fighter or do I want to be a lover and a mother and embrace my human side and take care of these kids in this village? And Terra, just character design-wise, she stands out with that green hair, with the kind of pink and purple armor for the little, you know, sprite that she is. But when she uses her morph ability, you see her turn into just this amazing-looking Esper. As far as mechanics go, she's the only one who can naturally use magic besides Celis, who is a formed Magitech knight in the game. Everyone else has to learn magic from Esper. She gains it naturally. Mechanics, the morph mechanic doesn't last long, but it does increase your power exponentially. As far as player connection goes, when you get towards the end of the game, all the other characters from this huge cast in Final Fantasy VI all have one worry on their mind, so to say. If they take out Kefka and destroy him and, you know, sever the link between magic and the world, is Terra going to survive? Because she is half Esper. And that's such a pull. And you always feel for her as she explores her own humanity, because you as a person have to explore your own humanity for the choices that you make. And so does Terra. And so I always felt super connected to her when I played through Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, Terra is very much your vehicle through the story. You know, she drives the plot of Final Fantasy VI more than any other character, and all the characters in 6 really get their own moments, but Terra, this is her story in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, and all those other characters have their own plot-driven points where they move it forward. You know, when you start the second half of the game, you start off as Celis, refining all the party members. But it is Terra that is the main focus underneath this massive cast of characters with all these massive stories. Which leads us on to number 5, going back to Final Fantasy X, Oran.
This guy is just, I'm going to put it simply, he is badass incarnate.
Oran is indeed a badass. When you talk character design, you think of his gigantic katana, that red coat, the mug, the gigantic, jug that he's got, and he's got his shades on, he's got the gray hair, he looks rough, he looks weathered, he has his arm in a coat the whole time, and you think like, oh man, he has a limp arm, what's he gonna do with that big katana? He's gonna one-hand it? And then when you finally for the first time play it, and you get him in combat for the first time, and that arm shoots up out of that jacket to grab that sword with both hands, you're like, oh.
Yeah, Oran feels good, his design is spot on in every way, but I want to focus on his development, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He, in my opinion, when you meet him, is already a fully developed character, but you don't know that about him.
Yep.
You have to find out who Oran is, what's his deal, but he's already had his character arc by the time Titus comes into the story.
Yep. Well, he's the thing that pushes Titus from, Xanarkand, of the dream to Xanarkand of reality. He is working with Jecht the entire time. He is the thing that unravels all of these things that you don't understand as you go through the story. And then Oran himself, in his just blatant dedication to protecting Yuna, and yet he doesn't reveal he's trying to protect Yuna from a false religion and what the faith actually means. No, Oran is just protecting her to protect Yuna, not to just be her guardian, but to be her guardian not in just the spiritual sense as she travels across Spira, but also to physically protect her from the lies that he has come to know, which cost him his life. And you come to find out that he is so determined to fulfill his word to Braska for Braska's daughter Yuna, that he is willing to remain dead, not go to the far plane, and continue to fight on. That's determination. And he has a quote that just, for me, the first time I heard it when I was playing, is something that I still sticks with me. And I love his line as you're about to fight Lady Yunaleska, as you discover all the lies. And he says, "Die and be free of pain, or live and fight your sorrow." And that's such a climactic line for me, and it defines all of Oran's character.
Yeah, it really puts all of his development throughout the game into one line. You've got this mentor character, because he's very much not just Titus' mentor, but the entire party.
Yep.
He's almost kind of like their bastion of strength.
Yep.
And this line really just sets the whole tone of the game into one sentence.
And I think it also incorporates into his mechanics. Oran is your heavy hitter. He can smash through any high armored character. When he goes for his overdrives, they're just these massive shows of fire and slams and, swordplay. He even has one where he just straight up bats an enemy so hard with the broadside of the sword that they go flying off the screen. He truly lives and mechanically incorporates everything of that line, die and be free of pain, or live and fight your sorrow. And he even refuses to go to the far plane and die so he can continue to fight sorrow.
Yeah, he is a complete package as a character.
Absolutely.
Just everything about him meshes together.
And he fits right in with the rest of the cast. So let's go on to number 4 from Final Fantasy IV, Cecil Harvey. The Dark Knight turned Paladin. As far as character design goes, when you start out Final Fantasy IV and that music kicks up, the flight of the Red Wings, the bom, bom, ba 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 ba, it's so cool. And you see Cecil in his dark armor and you're like, wow, I'm going to start this game out as a badass. Get into your first fight, you use the Dark Blade technique, and you shoot this wave of dark energy across everything. It just annihilates them, and also annihilates you at the cost of your own HP. And you're like, what an awesome mechanic, this dude's a badass. And then you get back to the first castle, report to the king, and you see that Cecil has some character to him. He's questioning the king's decisions to attack those people, even though he's a dark knight. Underneath all this dark and gritty armor and these just kind of violent, shadowy attacks, works a conscience that is kicking in. And then you see him get used as a pawn to destroy the Village of Mist. And eventually, he goes up to the Mount of Ordeals and has to confront his own darkness to become a paladin. And that fight just encapsulates everything that Cecil is. To beat the Dark Knight and become the paladin, you have to choose not to attack. If you continue to attack, you will slowly lose the fight. if you don't attack and make peace and embrace that darkness, which Cecil does, then he can move on to be a paladin. And the mechanics change. He goes from a heavy hitter with this big AoE attack that can clear everything to a heavy single target hitter with some white magic, but all of a sudden he becomes a passive tank. Anytime somebody gets low on HP in the game, Cecil will dive in front of them and take the hits. So as the mechanics go, Cecil sets the tone for what a paladin is for the rest of the series. And even when we get into like Final Fantasy XIV Online, the paladin is a tank class in that MMORPG, and they have Cecil to thank for that lore. He is a strong character. He goes through a ton of development confronting himself, his relationship with Rosa, everything that goes on. Cecil stands out as a strong character that goes through struggles and continues to learn more about himself and rise up.
Yeah, Cecil is a character that really shows how development and mechanics can work together. Because, as Rage said, in the first part of the game, he is a Dark Knight. He's a heavy hitter, offensive, damage-dealing character. But as the game goes on, you grow into a paladin and you become a defender for your party. You help those who might not be able to help themselves.
As a teenager, when I played Final Fantasy IV for the first time through, and I saw Cecil as a paladin, it inspired me. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to do good. I wanted to throw myself in the face of danger for others, and it just grabbed me, and it's something that stayed with me for the rest of my life. Something to aspire to. I don't think any of us will ever be a Cecil Harvey.
No.
But it's something to aspire to, and so that always connected me on a very deep level to that character. This leads us on to number 3. Get ready. Final Fantasy VII.
It's your boy Cloud Strife.
And you may be thinking, why is Cloud at number 3? But you knew he was going to wind up in the top of the list. But Cloud stands out. And he still stands out to this day, even in his darker Advent Children moody thing that he's taken on lately. From the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, when he's in this blue with this bright blonde spiky hair and the first time 3D graphics were enabled, and the gigantic Buster Sword on his back, when you started up that game and you looked at the art on the front of the CDs, you knew you were in for a trip because of this character's design.
Yeah, I mean, people will say, oh, Final Fantasy VII, it's overrated. It might be a little bit, but there's a reason it has a place in people's heart. And Cloud is the protagonist. You go through his story, his development is phenomenal. You start out kind of as this cocky, a little bit dorky guy, swinging around this big sword, and he's just flash. You know, he's all style, maybe not a lot of substance at first. But as you progress through the story, this is where we get the more broody kind of Cloud, and it makes sense once you play through it. You find out your whole life is a lie, you're just a puppet, you watched your best friend be murdered.
And you did nothing.
You did nothing to stop it. I mean, Cloud kind of has good reason to be a little bit down in the dumps.
Absolutely, but yet he still retains some of that brightness and that dorky kind of hope in the beginning of the game. When you're at the North Crater and you're about to go into the final fight, Cloud looks at the rest of the team and says, "Let's mosey." And Barrett's like, "What did you just say? Did you really just say that in this circumstance?" And he still retains that, but Cloud as a character, his development is amazing. He has to literally peel off all the layers of lies about not being really Soldier First Class, about his friend Zack, as you go through all these little subquests to find these things, and find out that he's not those things. He's just somebody who entered Soldier who didn't make the cut. He's been exposed to Mako, and everything he is a lie. He has to peel all that away, which is something for me as a player. What connected me to Cloud so much was, what parts of myself do I hide behind and embellish rather than embrace what I really am? And so as you get towards the end of the game, Cloud has to literally reinvent himself through trouble, through strife, through heartache, and through loss. And I think that's why the last name Strife is so fitting, and the first name Cloud. There's this little bit of hopefulness, this little bit of dorkiness. It's like a cloud passing by, and strife for everything that his life is going to encapsulate. As far as mechanics go,
yeah, his mechanics very much fit in with who he is. You know, you've got that big sword, and it always seems like Cloud's trying to add a little bit of extra flair to what he does. You know, Omni Slash is this big, bold super move, but that's who Cloud is. You know, he's not this down-to-earth, simple character. He is a little bit cocky, a little bit dorky, and his mechanics fit in with that.
Absolutely. Everything. Every time that I swung that Buster Sword, I could feel the weight of it in the, you know, they were good at the time, but poor graphics now, where you see that character literally almost kind of fly themselves into the throw of the hit. And Cloud just stands out as this heavy hitter, larger than life, flashy, spin the sword all the way around your back and launch it kind of guy. And so that leads us moving on to number 2 from Final Fantasy IX, Vivi Ornithir.
I love Vivi. He is easily one of my all-time favorite characters. His design is a nostalgic one. He harkens back to the Black Mage of Final Fantasy I. You know, he's got that completely overshadowed dark face with the glowing yellow eyes. Mm-hmm. He's got the hat, the robes. But you come to find out his design is key to who he is as a character. Mm-hmm. As you progress through the game, you find out Vivi's not really human. He is a construct of magic and a bit of a screw-up at that.
Yeah, he's totally not like the other Black Mages in Final Fantasy IX. He has more consciousness and self-awareness of who he is and what he wants. He has his own dreams and aspirations. And when you look at Vivi originally and you meet him, he kind of trips all over the place and you're like, oh, he's a cute Black Mage. Like, because Black Mages are cute when they have their hat on. We've always thought that. But we also know that Black Mages are a nuclear powerhouse. And Vivi, through his mechanics of the game, when you get into some of the higher end spells that he has, like Flare and some of the other, and the animations in this game, you realize that Vivi is this little package that packs a big punch. And as far as his development goes too, he is a little package that is dealing with some of the biggest issues that any character in the series has to deal with.
Yeah, Vivi's here, he has to accept that he's going to die. And he might not even have that much time in him, because the constructs, you know, the Black Mage constructs really are considered pretty disposable.
And they're made with a predetermined amount of time. And as you go through the game, you find the Black Mage Village and these almost childlike beings that are now conscious, and these other Black Mages say, well, you know, number 22 just stopped. And they're trying to grapple with what is death. And Vivi comes to realize that not only is he on a limited amount of time, probably shorter than the others, but he has to realize, maybe because I'm different, will I last longer? Will I won't? What is it to die? What is it not to die? What is it to live and make use of the time I have? All of the characters in Final Fantasy IX kind of stand for a struggle that they're dealing with, but Vivi's is the one that connects to us as human beings the most. And how will you face your mortality? What will you do with the time that you have? And Vivi, through the story, just tackles some of the toughest things that we as human beings deal with head on in this little guy that packs a huge punch.
Yeah, you just can't help but project onto Vivi a little bit. You know, even though he's the least human character, he's the most human character in 9.
Which puts him so high on the list. The subject material, his character design, the magic, the mechanics. Vivi is a standout character. Now, before we get to number 1, we have some honorable mentions. From Final Fantasy 15, I'm just going to say the boys.
These guys, the reason they're only on the honorable mentions is individually, Rage and I both kind of agree, they're not too stand out, but when you put them together, they're fantastic.
Yeah, the theme of brotherhood and the connection that you feel when you're playing with the boys in Final Fantasy 15 is amazing, but on their own, they don't stand out. Our next honorable mention is from Final Fantasy VI, Shadow. Shadow aesthetically, to me, always stood out. He's one of my favorite characters from Final Fantasy VI. His development, though, is hidden behind a bunch of hidden cutscenes about staying in inns at the right time with the right party at the right town, and it's very hard to get the background on him and how he develops as a character. But I love his mechanics. He's the only character that has his dog come flying out randomly and beat the crap out of stuff. He's one of the heaviest hitters in the game with his throw command, and if you're willing to throw away some of the best weapons and armor, you are able to do massive damage. He just stands out. He's so cold. He has this one line where he's talking to Terra about, don't be like me and others who have killed their emotions. And he is a guidance for some characters in small ways, and he's just that ninja, and to me, the best ninja in the Final Fantasy franchise.
Couldn't agree more. Our next one is Lulu from Final Fantasy X. Personally, I love her aesthetic. You know, she's kind of got that goth thing going on.
That outfit is amazing.
The outfit is amazing. And I even love her weapon, the little doll.
Yeah.
It's just so out there. but she really doesn't develop all that much throughout the games, and her character kind of boils down to, I am Yuna's guardian.
But mechanics, her overdrive, when you just go spam happy with one black mage spell again and again and again on something is amazing. The next one that we have from Final Fantasy VII is Vincent.
Good old Vincent Valentine. I love Vincent. Back in the day, he was my favorite character, but looking back on him, there's not a lot of substance. He looks awesome, he plays awesome, the transforming into different monsters is cool, but he just kind of sits in the background. He's like white bread. He's just bland.
He is very bland when you get past all the monster, hoity-toity, brooding, I'm a vampire, maybe I sparkle in the sunlight flash.
Yeah.
But Vincent is a standout character, and he is memorable. Our last honorable mention is Zidane from Final Fantasy IX.
He is an interesting one. He's the look at, what if we made the thief the main character?
My biggest complaint with Zidane is the mechanics end of the game. That game dragged on forever. It dragged on so long because every boss fight was steal the item, steal a piece of armor, and steal the good weapon. And it took multiple times. Every boss fight in that game, I felt like I was just healing my party, waiting for Zidane to get the last steal off so that I could finish the boss. And when you get to the last dungeon, it's all the worst. The best weapons and items in the game, throughout the whole game, but the last dungeon, all have to be stolen. So you're constantly just waiting for Zidane. So for me, the mechanics made me hate him regardless of anything else that happened in the game, because I was always like, did you steal it yet?
Yeah, and there is a lot to like about him. His design's very well done.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a good arc to him.
Yep.
It's just the mechanics really is a big anchor on him.
Yep. So now, the number one Final Fantasy character that Sage and I have picked throughout all of the franchises, playable protagonists with these criteria, across all the games, stands one man.
You've seen him time and again. He's come up in just about every adventure you've had. It's none other than
Cid. Specifically, Cid Highwind from Final Fantasy VII. But before we get into Cid Highwind himself, I want to talk about Cid in all the games. Cid is usually connected to airships. Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy VI, he's connected to the Magicite Factory. All these games, Final Fantasy VII, the airship. Cid is the person that you go to in many games who's connected somehow to the technology of the game that transport you around the world or understand how the world works.
he is always a mechanic in some way, except for maybe 8 where he's the headmaster, but let's even take 15, the most recent game. He is this old, rusty mechanic who fixes your car.
Cid is a standout character. He's one that's stood the test of time in almost all the games throughout the entire franchise. But out of all the Cids, Cid Highwind stands out the most to Sage and I.
Yeah, this guy, you meet him in Final Fantasy VII, and he is just this cranky, burnt-out old guy who's just done. He is not going to put up with any crap from anyone, but over time, you start to see who he actually is.
And why he is the way he is, and what his dreams and what his aspirations are, especially about going into space. In the end, you realize that's all he ever wanted, but it came at the cost of, people that were near and dear to him, and people that he blamed for the loss of his dream of being able to go into space, specifically Shara, who many people confused for his wife throughout the game. When you first meet him, you're like, your wife, and he's like, that ain't my wife, she's so dumb, I'd never marry her. And then you find out that she was right, and she was only trying to protect him. Cid is a character with a lot of background, a lot of big dreams, and to me represents a lot of humanity as a whole. What do we always shoot for as we've developed as a people? Shooting for the sky, shooting for the stars, and Cid encapsulates that. Character design, he's the only character that has a pack of Marlboro Reds. I don't care what anybody says, there's 2 red triangles and 1 white triangle in that headband, and smokes every single fight. And when you go for his limit break, he's like, hey, so use a cigarette? I'm gonna light dynamite with it and blow you up. Cid is amazing mechanically. He is a dragoon in Final Fantasy VII with his limits and how those work in the spear, which is a unique take on the dragoon because normally they're a heavy armored class. But Cid encapsulates those things.
The dragoon even fits with who he is personally, because the dragoons always, their lead ability is their leap.
Mm-hmm.
And Cid is tied with, space, airships, flight.
Mm-hmm.
What better class for that kind of character than the airborne?
Well, and it gives a new spin on the dragoon. You know, so Sid just stands out. He's a tie-in across all the games. Had Sid Highwind not been named as Sid, and their Sid's not be across all the games, I don't think we would have put him as number 1. But the importance of Sid throughout the series, and how it's always there, and Sid Highwind being this unique twist on a Dragoon, this character with this deep backstory and these huge dreams and aspirations, his mechanics and gameplay are just hilarious, even into the cinematics. At the end of the game, when the airship gets shot up out of the live stream, you see that cigarette that's in his mouth the whole game fall out of his mouth and just shock. Sid stands out as a fun, crabby, grumpy, loyal, awesome, deeply complex character.
Yeah, and you get his arc to a T as you play the game. You realize what makes him that grumpy old character, and we love him for it.
So that's our top 10 for Final Fantasy characters. Hope you enjoyed. Want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Obviously, everybody's going to have different opinions here. Leave some comments down below. Do you think our list is crazy? What would you put as number 1 or number 10 or anywhere on the list? And why? What are your guys' own criteria? Thanks so much for watching. Hit that like and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications as we come out with more top 10s in the future.
Catch you next time. Peace.